Right. So go play this because it's good. There you go. Yeah, I haven't done that one in a while, but seriously, this is a pretty good game, and I think that more people need to be playing it because it's sitting at around 15 concurrent players. And it's not really a super long game either. It doesn't have a ton of levels. I played it for roughly an hour, so that probably explains the relatively low player counts, but regardless, I hope a couple of you go over there to give this a shot because I think it's worth your time. That said, the game in question today, Copies Rock and Roll, is a platformer game that has a very, very different general vibe and idea to the game than really any of the platformers I've been playing on Roblox, and I think that's a blessing and a curse, mostly coming down from my own preferences, and less so from the actual game design perspective. There isn't a whole lot that I can say that's negative, or really honestly anything that's negative when it comes from a game design perspective, so today's video is almost entirely based on my opinions on the game and the game genre as a whole. So just understand that a lot of the stuff that I'm going to be saying here is not because I think the game is bad, far from it, it's just personal preference for me. And after all, this is my channel, so of course I'm going to like or dislike different games for different reasons. And you don't have to agree with me. In fact, I don't think a lot of the people who play this game are, and that's fine. That said, I mentioned that this game is very different from a lot of the other platformers I've played, and let's answer why that is. Most notably, unlike pretty much every other Roblox platformer I've played, Copies Rock and Roll is based around completing levels quickly and doing so while completing as many objectives as possible. In this case, the objectives are always all the same, and in that case, the objective is to collect treats or a candy or what have you, and then get to the end of the level. The levels themselves are all relatively short, and if you're just going straight to the end of the level, every single level in the game can probably be completed within probably 30 seconds. You could just hold forward, jump straight to the end, and good job, you won. You didn't really win because you didn't get any treats. You didn't complete any of the objectives, and if you do that, you can't even progress on to the next level. So other than speedrunning potential, there is absolutely no reason to just go straight to the end of the level. So that leaves us with collecting the treats in the game, along with the other collectibles that are here, and we'll be talking about them just sort of being here in just a second. First, I want to talk about collecting treats, because generally speaking, I think this is quite well done, and they get scattered out pretty well throughout the different levels, and while it was a little bit confusing at first when I was going through and I didn't understand that treats would be hidden in very specific things, especially in the first level, understanding that treats would always be in these barrels but never in the big boxes, which was always throwing me off. But once I figured that out, it was pretty self-explanatory for the rest of the game, understanding which objects would have treats and which ones would have the musical notes. When you progress to later levels in the game, there are all sorts of different things that you can do to get treats. Things like little bounce pads that if you roll over or jump on, they'll summon a treat after you go in the correct order. Buttons that you push with a dash, which will give you treats. And later on down the line, enemies that if you take out will also give you treats. There's a whole bunch of different things in the game that incentivize you to interact with them, and when you do, it rewards you with effectively the stars or currency of the game in a lot of ways. So, like I said, goal is pretty simple. You're on a timer, you want to collect as many treats as you can, and then get to the end of the level before the timer runs out. If the timer runs out, you lose, game over, that's it, reset. At the end of the level, you'll get a rank depending on how many things you collected and how fast you completed the level. Now this, at baseline, is Cappy's Rock and Roll. I wanted to go over that so that way you have the context for what I'm about to say, which is that the movement in this game, while being absolutely fantastic and something that I haven't touched on quite yet, with the whole experience being almost flawless, with the only real complaint that I have being that wall jumps are extremely wonky when you're trying to bounce from one wall to another wall, because if you hold away from the wall like you would normally do to jump to the next wall, it instead just kicks you off of the wall. It feels weird in practice and definitely seems like there should have been some sort of very small buffer window where if you press the other way, it doesn't immediately kick you off the wall. Maybe after like half a second it kicks you off the wall, but it led to me often just getting stuck on wall jump areas when it otherwise really should not have turned out that way. But generally speaking, the The movement is extremely fluid. You have access to a ton of different movement options. You can roll, dash in the air, slow your descent while falling, glide, do a super jump in the middle of the air by using your dash and then pressing jump in the air. There are so many different ways that you can move around the level, it's staggering. But for me, this level of movement ends up hitting that level that I didn't think we'd ever reach, where the movement is too free-flowing. I've talked about this in some of my past videos speaking about platformers, and I always talk about how I'm not a huge fan of ridiculously restrictive movement. So things like Abyss World, I was not a huge fan of the movement in that game because it's basically hold, jump, let go, and pray. I like having control of my character the entire time. That said, I feel like there is a level of restriction that you need, and I was honestly kind of waiting for a game like this to be able to talk about where that level of restriction is simply absent. It feels like in a quest to make sure that you never felt like you were out of control of your character, the game gave you too many options, and they supplemented this by the way that they designed their game. So I don't think it hurts the game directly, but for me personally, it makes it less fun and is not something I prefer. A great example of this is that if you jump onto a wall, even if you're not wall jumping to another wall, if you just continue to jump on the same wall, you can gain height forever. This does not feel right from someone who's played a lot of platformers. Generally speaking, if you do a wall jump and then you try to wall jump off of the same wall, you lose height and then eventually fall. But in this game, you can just scale anything by just holding forward and jumping. Like I said, to me, doesn't seem right, doesn't feel right, and I just don't like that. Not much more I can say on it. Now again, the game is designed around this type of movement that's completely unrestrictive, because it's not about the difficulty of getting to the end of the level, it's about the path that you lay out in order to get through the level, so that way you pick up as many things as possible and then get to the end in the time limit. Which again, is not at all my cup of tea. I don't like the idea of having to memorize the whole level that I'm playing and speed run the whole level that I'm playing, going in a very specific order in order to make sure that I pick up every single thing in order to actually complete the game in its entirety. And I did not complete the game in its entirety because this game is absolutely fucking ridiculously hard to 100%. It is absurd to the nth degree. Now, to be clear, I don't think that every game should be a foregone conclusion that every single person who plays it should be able to 100% the game. And that's still the case here. I'm not mad at the game that I couldn't 100% it, or more specifically, I couldn't be bothered to memorize a whole bunch of stuff to 100% it. But that said, some of the stuff on display here is a bit ridiculous in my opinion, and I think a lot of that stems from the timer and the useless collectibles littered around the map. You see, what I haven't mentioned quite yet, but you've probably been seeing, is that aside from the treats in the levels, there's a whole bunch of other garbage. These musical notes scattered around, as far as I understand, do absolutely nothing aside from change some of the score you get at the end of the level, but the best rank that you can get at the end of the level is to collect all of the treats and get to the end of the level, which means that if you were going for the best rank, all of these extra things mean absolutely nothing. And I would wager to say that your average player either does not care whatsoever about their ranking at the end of the level, or they care completely and they want to get the best thing, which means that these musical notes serve no purpose for anybody. They're not here for the casual player just running through levels because it doesn't do anything for them and they don't care. And it doesn't do anything for the hardcore players because they're just going after the treats to get the highest rank and these things don't do anything for them. So I just don't even know why these things are in the game, and it feels like there was such an easy layup for these things to have been used and to make it more interesting for everyone playing and give everyone more of a chance to complete these levels to completion. And of course, that extremely simple concept would be that when you collect musical notes, it increases the time on the timer. As far as I could tell, there was no way to increase the time on the timers in the game, which for a lot of the later levels in the game, in of itself seems very absurd. I mean, after all, even on the speedrun.com page for this game, which I was shocked that there even was one, but regardless, the all treats percentage speedrun for the two most recent levels in the game is barren. There's nobody on here. And if you go to the game page itself and look down in the badges for people getting a K rank, which means getting all of the treats on the newest levels, for the last level of the game, 204 people have ever completed this. ever. Out of the over 3,000 people who have completed the level, if 200 of them have ever 100%ed it, there might be an issue going on here. It just feels absurd when I can get to, for example, the end of the final level of the game, and I have just barely half of the candies in the level, and I'm completing it at 1 second left. I would need to go through that and collect 2 times the amount of things that I needed to do in half the amount of time. That's ridiculous. Either way, like I said, maybe there was a way to get more time in the levels and I just missed it. I don't think that there was, unless it was like very, very cryptically explained somewhere. But not having the extra time and just being forced to basically take the L did not feel good on any occasion. Overall though, like I said, I did have a lot of fun with the game, and I'm glad that I played it. It's not like the game was so incredibly difficult that I wasn't able to get enough treats to get to the next level, and that's really what counts at the end of the day. If you're really invested in trying to 100% these kinds of games, you're going to be at it for a long time, and I wish you luck if you're not going to that speedrun tab and looking up ways to complete it, which you can't even do for that final level because, well, there's nobody. Either way, the game is a good time, and as I said earlier, I highly recommend giving it a shot. With that, I am wrapping up though. So naturally, if you enjoyed the video, you can leave a like and subscribe. If you didn't, don't. And with all that being said, have a wonderful day or night wherever you are, and I'll see you guys next time.